Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Nachliel Selavan and I'm here to go over a very special feature of Herzog's Tanakh website, specifically their Tanakh map. And I'm going to be doing this in English as the Hebrew tutorial already exists. And the first part of this video is going to be going over the Tanakh map to get you familiar with it and to encourage you to use it. And the second part is going to be going over one very important feature which is so underrated because we need to know how to use it. And that is called layers. So let's get straight into it. I'm here on hatanach.com. This is the English website. Of course, it is fully compatible in English and in Hebrew. And there's a lot to do on this actual website to explore it. Take a look, for example, that here on your homepage, you're going to have the parasha. You're going to have Parashat HaShavua. It's Parashat Lech Lecha. And you have 46 topics. There's 23 points in Lech Lecha on the map. There's 32 articles, audio, video, post, personalities. And in Hebrew, you're going to have some things that you don't have in English. Some of these articles actually are in Hebrew, not in English. But this is the overview. Instead of clicking on the 23 locations on the map, though I'm going to click on it once so you see what it does. You see there's all these different locations. What you actually want to do is go to the top right drop-down menu, which in Hebrew is probably going to be on the left, and select the Maps function. Welcome to Hatanach, Herzog's Hatanach map. This Tanakh map is a very powerful tool, and it's more than meets the eye at first. So let's explore its basic features and interface before we delve into the layers. So let's just take a look. So first of all, the map itself is a very clean map. On the top right, you have two options. One is map, one is satellite. Under map, if you unselect terrain, it's going to be a much cleaner map. The reason you want terrain can be just so you understand the topography, understand what is called the derech hahar, the hill, vayatek misham hahara, which is in this parasha. I like to keep it there, but you can always remove it. If you're going to click satellite, what you're going to have is a contemporary map. Let's zoom out so you get an idea. This is very nice to see it this way, and it's also very, very clean. Now, if you either stay on satellite map or go back to your regular map is up to you. I think it's easier with map for some of the following reasons. Take a look at the bottom. This is where the important thing is going to happen. You have this figure, which is our yellow Google Earth person, Google Street View. All of the blue areas that light up are Google Street View. As pretty much a pro on Google Street View, I do not recommend using it for the Hatanach website because the integration is not seamless. And you're going to get stuck somewhere and wonder, what am I doing here and how do I get out of here? The way to leave it is actually on this little arrow. You just go back. I don't recommend using it here. It's nice and it's fun. It's more effective to do that on Google Earth itself. And that being said, hopefully in the future it will be more smoothly integrated. Now let's look at the bottom. You have plus and minus. That's just zooming in and zooming out. I personally like to use the scroll in the mouse or on the mouse pad. That's a personal choice. Now, the modern map. You click the modern map and you're going to have the modern borders and modern locations, in this case in English and sometimes in the indigenous language. So you have the Greek islands are in Greek. You have Arabic. That's a different story. If you go back to regular maps, you will still have the modern maps. I'm clicking back to biblical map to make it cleaner, but this is going to have use in the future. And here is the cream of the crop, which is the layers function on the bottom right. Right now, it doesn't really do much. And that's because we need to know how to use it. So before we learn how to use it, I'm going to first go over a few primary features of the map itself, which are very important. Please get used to them, play with them. And once you're familiar with them, you can also let your students play around with these features. They're very, very helpful. So let's zoom in. What happens when you actually click on a location? Well, first of all, these locations are a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of them. And so I recommend doing the following. Here's another very important feature. Take a look on the left where you have two filters. You have Map by Era. Click. It's going to open and close. And you have Map by Chapter, which also has a range of chapters and enables you to see the text. We're going to get to that soon. So going back to Map by Era. Right now you are seeing the entire range of areas in all of Tanakh. So if you zoom all the way out, you can get to Mehodu ve'ad Kush. Persia, well, you don't really get to Hodu here, but you basically have the farthest extent of Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East as it is in Tanakh. there's a few locations which actually don't show up here because the filter is too general. So for example, Tarsus, Tarshish, or you have the three different opinions as to where Tarshish is. One of them places them here in Spain. Tarshish here in Turkey does not show up. There's a lot of things which aren't perfect yet, but this is the overall range. Now, let's take a look at the different parts on this ruler. So let's go to just the beginning, which is, of course, the first part of Sefer Bereshit, pretty much Parashat Bereshit and Noach, and just click that. Let's close this. Now notice how almost everything vanished. All you have is Bavel, Ashur, and Mitzrayim, Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt. You don't even have Ur Kasdim until you really, really zoom in. It's not even showing up here. That's kind of cool. You're going to have to zoom in a little bit further. Here's Ammon, Moab, and so on. You'll get more of them. Now let's just select a location. What happens if I click on Gerar, let's say? So I click on Gerar, and what's going to show up in English is a basic overview of the place. It's going to show you the biblical eras in which it shows up. The beginning, the forefathers, monarchy. What does that mean? Let's go back to the filter for the map by era. The beginning, forefathers from Egypt to Canaan, settling the land, monarchy, return to Zion, which is Shivat Zion, Ezra, Nehemiah, Divrei Yamim, etc. Right? There are only 3 periods in which this is going to show up. Here's some information about it. You can read more. Let's see what happens when you click more. There's a lot more to see. A lot of this is Hebrew. There's bibliography. You can look at the website Dot. There's a lot to see. Let's close this. Clicking on Gerar again. There's 10 references to it, 1 article, 2 lessons, 4 topics, 4 personalities. And again, some of these are going to be in Hebrew, but it's good that you see all of them. What happens if I click on personalities? There are 4 personalities in association with Gerar. Avraham goes to Gerar, Yitzchak goes to Gerar, Avimelech Melech Gerar, and Asa Melech Yehuda also has a connection to Gerar. Let's see what happens if I click on Asa. It's going to open up a separate tab. And here's 17 results which have to do with Sarah. Oh, Alex Israel, Rabbi Sabato, etc., etc. Explore, have a good time. Some of these things are a little bit weird. If you click on them, not really clear what's going to happen. Takes you back to the map. It can be a little bit confusing, but there's a lot to do here. Let's go back. Now, what's important for us is actually, let's see what happens when I click here. Okay. 10 references. The 10 references, it's going to group them based on book where it shows up like this. You can collapse it, open it up, and it shows you the different psukim in which Gerar shows up. And so you can use this in the classroom as saying, how many different times does a particular city show up? Look up the other occasions, etc., etc. You can study and research this and see what happens. Okay, let's clear. We're going to clear this selection. Okay, good. Now it's going to go out to everything else. It's going to zoom out. Now, the next thing I want to show you is what it means to search map by chapter as opposed to by era. So let's open map by chapter. I'm going to choose Sefer. Let's take one that has a lot of locations. Sefer Yehoshua, Book of Joshua. And right now you have all the places which show up in Sefer Yehoshua, which is really, really nice. But what I want to do is choose a range. So I'm going to do chapter 1 through chapter 3, and now you're going to see all the locations that are relevant to that, and it's much narrower. So you have Abel Hashittim, you have the Jordan River, you should have Arovot Moav. It doesn't show up in name, but this is it, and the Meraglim go straight into Yericho. And another example of why you want the terrain is just imagine trying to understand why Rachav says to the Meraglim, to the spies, instead of going back to the base camp in Abel Hashittim through the Jordan, go into the Har. When you look at it, or when you stand on location, it's quite obvious why you would do this, because the hill is actually, the Har is further in enemy territory. It's the counterintuitive thing to do, but the alternative is to be in the Kikar HaYarden, and to be in the plain in which you are in plain sight and easy to capture. And so you're going further into enemy territory where you're in the hills, you're harder to find, you wait out for 3 days, and then you go back to base camp. And so understanding the terrain is definitely going to help us understand the story better. So this gives you a range. In addition, you can say, let's view the text. And you're viewing the text in Hebrew, which is really, really nice. You can look at the locations. You can click go to the Tanakh page itself. It's going to open a separate tab. And here you have the location. Now it's in English. You can switch it to Hebrew. You get the idea. Okay, let's close this. Oh, it goes straight to chapter 1. Okay, that's our range. You can click next chapter. Remember, we have 3 chapters, so it's within that range. You can keep on reading and you can scroll. So you have it all here. Let's clear. Now that we've done this, I would like to show you the immense benefit of using the layers. So let's first of all see what the layers does when you click on it by default. Let's zoom out. Okay, so we have a full view. I'm clicking the layers now, and you're going to have 3 things. And there's markers. Let's undo the markers. And it's going to take off those little location icons, which are kind of fun to have. You don't really have to have them, but I'm just going to keep them on. Each color is probably a different layer. It has some kind of meaning in terms of the time period that it relates to. I'm going to keep them on. Now, this is where the layers is more adapted to the Hebrew as opposed to the English. You're going to see that sometimes you have the same layer show up once in English, once in Hebrew, or just in Hebrew. These are features which Herzog is working on. I wouldn't worry about it too much. They're going to get better, especially with your feedback. And at the end, we're going to talk about how you can submit that feedback. Now, Mizrach Kadum means ancient Near East. Let's just click on that and see what happens. These are showing you, this is just one layer which is relevant to the entire map. These are all locations which have to do with the ancient Near East. So Hatti, the land of Chet, this is the mighty kingdom of the Hittites. There's Egypt, there's Aram, Persia. So this is kind of cool. On some of these you can actually click, but as you can see, they're not exactly so fun to work with. They're a bit crude, but they're here. They exist. It shows you the ancient kingdoms of the Near East: Aram Damascus, Tadmor, Palmyra, Mari, Mitanni. The Mitanni are a very important kingdom which made alliances with Egypt, but then the Hittites took them over, and then Ramses the Great fought against them. You can use this when you're familiar with ancient Near Eastern studies. Let's remove that. Now, Hayinu Kecholmim is more of a Herzog initiative of particular yeshivot, which have a certain kind of program. There's a lot of fun here. Yeshivat Amit Ashdod, Karmei Yehuda. This is something that you don't really need to think about when you're preparing your class. Let's remove it. Here is where it's about to get fun. The way to utilize layers, shchavot, to its maximal ability is to actually use your filters of selecting by era or selecting by chapter or by range. And for this, the difficult part is that there isn't, as far as I know, any list where you have all of the available layers, so you really have to know what you're looking for. And so I'd like to encourage you to play around with this feature, and let me now get into it and show you the different things you can do. So map of the era. So the first thing I'm going to show you is just Tekufat Ha'avot, the forefathers. So I'm cleaning the map of everything. Let's zoom out. Okay, keep it clean. You can close this. Now let's click on layers. And what you have currently is just Nachal HaYarmukh, the Yarmukh River, which isn't really apparently so important other than for the story of Yaakov Avinu crossing the Yarmukh in and out of Aram Naharaim. But let's now select by chapter, and that is going to be where you're going to see some interesting things. So let's get into it. We are talking about Avraham Avinu. Let's select a range. Let's look at Bereshit, Genesis. We're going to go from chapter, let's just say Yud Aleph, 11, all the way to 18, Yud Chet, and that's where you're going to have a lot of the stories. Okay, I'm not going to view the text right now. I'm just keeping it here. Now look what happened to layers. You have several different things that showed up. Let's just zoom out so you can see them. And you can, of course, view more than one layer at a time. Okay, it's a bit crowded. Let's look in order. Terach goes to Haran. So we have Ur Kasdim being in the city of Ur. There are about 3 opinions as to where Ur actually was. This opinion is one which fits with the ziggurats, the temples to heaven, the stairways to heaven, as it was, where Avraham was combating against Avodah Zarah, centralized control through these ideologies which were called Avodat Kochavim. It's taking that one opinion. There are several others of them. Ur was actually resting on the banks of the Persian Gulf, which reached all the way up to Ur back in the day, but it receded since then. It is more than 3,000 years ago. So this is part 1. Avraham Avinu goes all the way to Haran. Here's Haran in Turkey. Now you can unclick it. I'm just going to keep it clicked. Okay. Avraham now goes into Eretz Canaan. Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad mekom Shechem ad Elon Moreh ve'Kanaani az ba'aretz. Avraham Avinu comes into Eretz Canaan, going straight into Shechem, and you can follow these pesukim. Here I would say you do want to see the text. This is not the chapter we want. Let's go here, Lech Lecha, and you have Avraham Avinu going, look, Vayavo Avram ba'aretz ad mekom Shechem ad Elon Moreh v'Kna'ani az ba'aretz. Here is Shechem, and I'm keeping the hills, even though it's harder to see, because you need to understand that this is Derech HaHar. The next stop that Avraham goes to, let's go to, Avraham goes to Canaan, right? We're going to stay in here. Looks like that sort of vanished when I opened the text. I guess you have bugs sometimes. Now Avraham goes down to Eretz Mitzrayim. Let's just zoom out so we have the whole thing. And you can basically follow the entire parasha. Here, this is it. Mas'ot Avraham ba'aretz. That's what I was looking for. So you can continue. Vayavo Avraham ba'aretz. Here, I'm going to Pasuk Chet. Vayatek misham ha'ara mikedem lebet el vayet ohalo. Avraham Avinu continues ha'ara. This is the har. And if I do this, if I uncheck terrain, what is vayatek misham ha'ara? I don't know. This is the har. Vayatek misham ha'ara mikedem lebet el vayet ohalo. So he goes to a place which is kedem. Again, kedem means east, as opposed to yama, which means towards the Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the yam. Mikedem lebet el vayet ohalo. And here he is. Bet el miyam. V'ha'ai mikedem va'ivin sham mizbeach la'Hashem ha'nireh elav. And so on. He builds a mizbeach here. What does he do from here? You continue into Pasuk Tet, Vayisa Avram aloch v'nasoa ha'negba. Avraham continues going into the Negev. Here's Elonei Mamre, and then he finally goes into Eretz Canaan. And so you have a beautiful example of how the maps actually work when you select a range. Now let's do something else. I'm continuing to be keeping the routes selected. I want to actually see Avraham Avinu going through Mesopotamia. Now here's something you can do with your students. Let's go to modern map on the bottom right. How many countries did Avraham Avinu travel through? How many modern countries? So you can look and see how many different countries he goes to. I'm keeping the markers out. Let's try to clean the map. And Avraham Avinu is actually going through several different countries. He starts in Iraq, he goes through Turkey, and he comes through Lebanon, and he goes into Israel, and then goes to Egypt. That's something cool. Now let's clean that up. I'm returning to biblical map. Why didn't Avraham Avinu go in a straight line between Ur to Eretz Canaan? Why did he have to beeline through Haran? So if you look at the actual map, the answer to that is very clear, because you're staying along the water, along the Fertile Crescent. Here, let's go through a satellite map. That makes it much easier. You're going along the Nahar Prat, the Euphrates River, staying close to water and civilization, as opposed to going directly through the desert, which you would actually need a caravan to do, camels to do, and when you're a whole household and so on, it's expensive, it's dangerous, and it's not exactly clear that people knew how to do this at the time in this region. And so it makes a lot more sense to stay in the Fertile Crescent, right? So that's something that you can do. Let's clear, close. So that was one example. The next example I want you to see, which is fascinating, has to do with the portions, the Nachalot of Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to go back to our biblical map, just to clean it up a little bit. Now what we're going to do is go straight to settling the land. Settling the land, Sefer Yoshua. Now let's open maps. The layers doesn't do anything, so you have to go and select by chapter. We're going to go into Sefer Yoshua, and I'm going to check layers again, and now you have a lot more to see. So let's zoom in a little bit into the land and take a look. You have tribal territories with names, Nachalotim Shemot. You see English and Hebrew, they're both the same. Prat, Euphrates, Nahar, Yarden aren't the same, so you have different ones. Tribal lands with territories, boom. Not 100%, not exact. You don't really see Shimon. You see it in name, but you don't see it in color. So that's a bit of a, you can call it a blip. But you can also take a look at pretty much at the general division of the land into Nachalot in Yoshua. Now let's take a look at Nachalotim Shemot. Pretty much the same thing. What's the difference? Hebrew, English. That's pretty much the difference. Okay, Nahar Yarden, here's the Jordan River. Let's clean these so you can see it. The Jordan River is important for crossing Eretz Yehuda. It comes from Dan, Yored Midan, Yarden. That's why it's called that. And the Euphrates River, why is that important? V'shatir gvulcha miyam suf ad yam plishtim midbar ad nahar is one. What's Nahar? Nahar Prat. Ad nahar gadol Nahar Prat yeh gvulchem. You need to understand that the border could have been to Nahar Prat, and there are several different possibilities to where the border is supposed to be, where it actually was. First, entry into with Yoshua. Then we have by Ole Bavel. There's a lot to discuss, and that's all here in the layers. Here we go, Nahar Yarden, and here's the Nachalot. So that's kind of cool. Now, if you want to use the modern map, you can tell your students, hey, why don't you find out which Nachala your hometown is in, and send them on a mission to go and look for it, which is kind of cool. So you can look at Nachal Arnon. You see that's on the border of Reuven. There's a lot more that you can do here. I want to really keep it simple. Let's clear this. Now, one last thing I'm going to show you, which has to do with Nachalot. Let's compare. Let's go back to a biblical map. Let's compare the Nachalot in Yehoshua and in the conquest of Bamidbar and Ever HaYarden, what we were supposed to get in the times of Abraham and what we actually got. In order to do that, again, you actually need to know your range. So we're going to go into Bamidbar, Numbers, and we're going to choose the last 5 chapters because that's more or less where all this happens. So we're going to go Perek Lamed, chapter 30, all the way to Lamed Vav. And you can view the text if you want, just so you know what we're talking about. Here we are. We're talking about Matot Mas'eh and so on. Okay? Now let's close this. Here are all the important locations because these locations are mentioned in the conquests, especially in Ever HaYarden. Now look at the layers, and what do we have here? We have the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. Again, this is in Hebrew. This is one of those things that with your usage and input we can change. Eretz Yisrael and Mas'eh. Here's the borders that we're supposed to get based on Mas'eh. And here we're going to superimpose the borders that are supposed to be in Bereshit, and that's why you have Nahar Prat. Here's Nahar Yarden. We should also have Nahar Prat here. We don't, but again, this isn't perfect. We're working on it. It's up here, but you can't select it. And you're kind of getting the sense of what you can do with the layers. And there's much more where this came from. There's different battles in Sefer Yehoshua. There's much more to see. So to sum this up, first of all, I would like to ask you, what would you like to see on the Tanakh map layers? What features would make it easier for you? Would you like to see a feature which has a list of the available ones? Is there a menu? How can we do this? And please, of course, make sure to submit that information, to write this down. How can you find out? So the next thing I'd like to do, and I'm going to link this in the description for the YouTube video, is Rabbi Dr. Shuki Rice, who founded this website, has a Facebook page. If you do Facebook, it's called Al HaMapa, on the map, and that's dedicated to teachers who are interested in using this website and in integrating maps and geography in the teaching of Tanakh. There's constantly ideas there. It's a very warm and friendly environment for you to share ideas. And finally, if you like this video, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, share this video. I hope you enjoy it. There's a lot more to see here, a lot more to do. I'd appreciate your feedback and your input. Don't be a stranger. So I'm Nachliel Selavan once again. You're watching Museum Tours, or whatever this channel is going to be called in the future. Thank you very much for watching. And until then, keep the text alive and keep it happening.